Hi, my name is Tara Kachataroff, and I'm the host of Michigan Entrepreneur, where we feature businesses from startup to stellar. So today we have as our special guest, Jeff Droztalks, who's the founder of Droztalks.com.
Yes.
Welcome to the program.
Yes, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on, and we're actually going to be doing a two-part series with you because there's so much to talk about. I wanted to split it into two shows.
Good.
So in the first one, we're going to be talking about your book that came out in the past year. It's called Inspired, How Our Differences Are Changing the Workplace.
Yep.
We're going to get to that in a moment, but before we do, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what kind of led you up to creating Droztalks.com?
Sure. So grew up in the area, Royal Oak resident for many, many years, and after growing up in Royal Oak, I was fortunate enough, I was a pretty good baseball player growing up, so I got a college scholarship to go to Central Michigan University. Wow. So there I did pretty well. I had a pretty nice career, and we were a very good baseball team back in the 80s. Aging myself there a little bit. But graduated with a degree from Central in communications, public speaking in particular. At that time, I had no idea that my life would be led down this path where I actually would be using it.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I love that.
I think most people, when they're in college, they are just kind of guessing, unless it's a doctor or a lawyer thing, then they're a little bit more focused. But got my degree, got out, and long story short, I spent 30 years in the restaurant industry. Slowly growing into a position where I was a trainer for a local company for a lot of years, and started getting that bug again to speak to people, to train them, and was starting to look a few years ago for a subject that I could really hone in on. So I went back to my experiences, and I've come to the conclusion that leadership is probably the most important thing when it comes to companies, because everything flows down from leadership. Organizational culture, the way companies are run, the satisfaction that people have at work. And from there, taking that and life experiences into consideration, Inspired started bubbling up inside me a few years ago.
Now, tell us a little bit about Droztalks.com and what's under that big umbrella. Just a big overview of that.
Yeah, so Droztalks, at the end of the day, what I built my company on, or what I'm building my company on, is to be able to get up in front of people and speak primarily about leadership, but also the things that go into that as well. Diversity and inclusion is quite a big subject in my book. Organizational culture is as well. So I wanted this to be a launching point to something bigger. And we started off with that, and now Droztalks is built into video blogging, and I have a podcast. And
is it a weekly podcast?
Yeah,
weekly?
Yeah. It's something that I put together with a combination of talking about motivational subjects and also about leadership as well.
Are you solo on it, or do you have guests every once in a while?
I've had guests on.
So, okay, yeah. Some solo, some guests?
Yes, and sometimes I've been on my own show as a guest too, as other people have interviewed me. So it's quite fascinating. That industry.
I would love to do that with you.
Oh, great.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to interview you on your own show. Yeah.
Oh, that would be awesome.
That would be great.
Yeah. So the podcast and that whole industry is growing exponentially these days. Just saw something the other day about the amount of revenue, advertising revenue, that companies are starting to put into podcasting. So it's a good time to be in podcasting.
Do you have? Are you inviting sponsors at this point?
Working on it.
You're working on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that will be an opportunity for people who want to be aligned with your brand as well.
Yes.
So that's good to know.
Yes,
yeah,
but that space is huge, and it's filling up fast.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, that's cool.
So your background in the restaurant industry, did you naturally gravitate towards the training end of things when you were there?
Yeah. Started out doing a lot of operations. A lot of companies want you to build. They want to build from within. So I spent a lot of time in the operations part, but
The training just came kind of natural?
It did, yeah, it
segue
really
for you?
did. I've always had an outgoing personality,
Mm-hmm.
and the companies that I worked for kind of recognized that, said, hey, you know, you'd be great. So as I spent a lot of years training, it was mostly classroom training,
Mm-hmm.
I started to get the bug, and you know, you realize that maybe you have a talent when you start getting feedback from other people.
Yeah.
And I started to get pretty consistent feedback that you're pretty good. So I said, you know, this is fun and I'm good at it. So
And it's funny
let's
that you
do
had
it.
your degree in communications
I know,
too.
I know.
mean, it's interesting to see the circle around, you know, there's just, you know,
Yeah.
something about that you kind of knew. So, you know, we're going to be talking about your book and kind of deconstructing some things about your book. And here's a copy of it. It's called Inspired. No, I can't read the title of it. Inspired, How Our Differences Are Changing the Workplace.
Yes.
And this book is focused on diversity and different aspects of diversity. And it's really very interesting. I do read the books, that when I have people on my show, I do read the books as long as they're not super long.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I have to read select chapters. But
Yeah.
I read this one cover to cover, and I really enjoyed it because I'd recently, the past couple of years, got a degree in HR, another degree. And I just, these topics are really more important and have more meaning to me now because of what I've studied and some of the recruiting I've done for some of the agencies that I've worked for as clients of mine. But this particular book, what is it that, I know you're kind of in a different stage in your career right now, but what was it that inspired you to write a book, and why now? Like, did you need to have this book to be where you want to be right now, positioned where you are, or for the future?
Yeah, so
I know there's lots of reasons why people write books.
Exactly.
Multi-layered.
Yeah, and usually it starts with a small idea, or maybe you see somebody and you kind of project and say, hey, you know what, I'd kind of like to be there one day, and I knew that in order to be a speaker, to be able to go out and get paid to speak, that people need to learn something from it. And diversity and inclusion is such a big topic these days, and it really is so applicable. And the books, you know,
And it's really the basic nuts and bolts of everything we need to know as human beings.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
It's funny that we kind of go full circle to have to name something that should be a part of who we are.
Exactly.
You know, it's
exactly.
interesting.
Yeah. So with all of the experiences that I learned, restaurant industry is so diverse, and I've traveled, and I've had an amazing opportunity. Starting in college as a baseball player, we traveled to different sites, mostly down south from here, to play other teams. But then when I started my restaurant career, especially later on, I traveled. I've been to all 50 states.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Wow.
I've been to Canada. I've been to
Wow.
Mexico, and
It's tremendous.
just the amount of diversity that's in the country, and we don't see it quite as much here in Michigan. There's, if you look at a map, there's kind of like a bowl around the Midwest where everything that's been happening population-wise in the country isn't affecting us as much. But the country is so diverse, and companies are realizing it, but they need to realize it more, that the things that make us different are things that shouldn't affect whether somebody gets a job or not. It's, you know what, if you got the talent, if you got the background, you know, none of those other things should matter. You should be judged on your talent and talent alone. And I've had some personal experiences with that as well that I have in the book about my kids and autism and some sexual orientation issues. And so it just kind of all came together. It's like, what do I want to put out in the world, at least to get things started? And this was really top of mind, and that's.
And why
that's
don't
why I
you
got it.
kind of give us a definition of diversity? I think we all know what it is, and certainly HR people know what it is, and it's
Yeah.
in, you know, the federal law and things like that. But why don't you talk a little bit about what the definition is to you through this, as speaking through this book?
Diversity, as I tried to put it into the book, is we have our differences. You know, there are usually 7 or 8 big differences that we look at. You know, sexual orientation, race, gender, amongst the other ones.
Age.
Yes, thank you.
Our favorite one.
Yeah, right. Age would be another one. And those differences need to be, or could be, there's an opportunity there for those differences to be embraced to make companies bigger, more dynamic. And as time goes on, companies are realizing that. And those differences don't matter as much. And because of that, I think that we're finding that companies are hiring people simply based on their talent more than all those other differences. And it's coming along, but I still think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this area.
I'd like to dig down into a couple of these things and maybe have you share a little bit about some background on these. I know one that I've seen a lot of has to do with age, and can you address the issue of age, because we're an aging society here in the United States and the world.
Yeah.
We have less young people in some ways. We have a huge, baby boomers are all retiring. That knowledge is going away. There's not a lot of ways to archive it in ways that are, people aren't archiving it fast enough.
Yes.
And they're not inviting older people into the workplace. And we all know that.
Yeah, and that's a mistake, and I think that probably will correct itself over time. Just to backtrack a little bit before I get on to age, a good part of the book is we talk about millennials in the book, and that's been a big subject for many years now, because the millennial group born between 1981 and 1996-ish, they are the biggest part of the workforce now. But a huge majority of those folks are into freelance work, and they're doing their own businesses, and because of that, there's just less people to fill up big companies. So what do you do as a company? You either got to make the workplace attractive for those millennials, or you have to take into consideration all the experiences, all of the seasoning that those of us who are a little bit older have, and bring us back into the workplace. Because, like you said, because maybe life just isn't being archived as fast as it needs to be. So we need to have some people that can go back on those experiences and use them. I do have one example toward the front of the book about the movie The Intern. Consequently,
I love that movie.
Yeah, thank you.
That was so funny.
Yeah. I watched it. It just happened. I thought it was good karma I was coming to talk to you today, because I saw the tail end of it last night, and I'm like, yeah, this is in the book, so this is good karma.
You can
right?
talk a little bit about the movie and backdrop of it.
Yeah, so Robert De Niro plays an older gentleman, basically looking at the beginning of the movie to kind of fill his life with something, because his wife passed away. And he meets this, or he becomes an intern at a company for a young woman, and I think she was it was a fashion company or something like
so
that.
Funny. Gosh.
Yeah, but he ends up helping her much more on a personal level than he ever could really professionally. And it's a story about what ends up becoming a friendship with them. And to me, that spoke a lot about bringing people a little bit older back into the workplace.
Even as consultants, they don't need to hire them so they don't have to get bent out of shape about the employee end of things. I don't understand why they're not bringing them more back as consultants.
Yeah.
It's just really valuable to have that. And I know everybody wants to run their own show, but you can do it behind the scenes. Nobody would have to know that there's some other people on your team behind the scenes, like advising you.
I think one of the fears that that companies have is that when you're bringing in somebody who's older, that they're going to expect and want to make more money than, say, you could at bringing in an intern or an entry-level person. But you got to weigh the pros and the cons with it. And if somebody's bringing in all that knowledge, all of that experience that they've had, there's a lot of value to that. And
there's a huge cost with the amount of turnover there is in the millennial. So you lose any gains you may have made on, they're really innovative, they're tech savvy, but you'll lose that history and the experiences of their history when they walk out of the door 18 months on the average. So I mean, you're losing so much that you need some continuity, and sometimes having like the I don't know, like the wise person in the corner or the wise group in the corner that has some consistent linear thing flowing through. You need some common thread of something, you know, like they're going to lose the story. You know how you sat around the fire and you told the stories and you kept it going, but if you cut out the storytellers and you only have pieces of the story,
or don't archive it like you said,
it's scary what will happen. I mean, think of the pharmaceutical industry. There's a huge amount of people that are retiring, and there's a lot of experience with that those subject matter experts, it's walking out the door. I mean,
and there is so there's the people side of it, but there's also the economic side of it. And when you lose those people, and again, I've archived this in the book, there's like a $40,000 cost when somebody leaves to bring in a new person. And there's usually 6 or 7 items that are taken into what this cost is. But still, that's $40,000 on average for a salary position just to get somebody back up to speed that you've lost. And that's why the workplace is trying to become a little bit more just friendly and wide open space.